Number 5, Jason Terry. After averaging nearly 20 points per game in his second and third seasons as an Atlanta Hawk, it seemed that Jason Terry would surely make the All-Star game eventually. Unfortunately though, as his career went on, he gradually went from a top option to an incredible role player. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Championships are won on the backs of role players, but the All-Star games are usually played without them. Still though, after his time with the Hawks, Jason Terry served as one of the most important pieces on the Dallas Mavericks run that has become severely underrated in NBA history. In his time with Dallas, Jason was forced to fill the enormous shoes left behind by Steve Nash, but that was no problem to him, as he quickly became a fan favorite, and during his second year with the team, Terry would help lead the Mavericks to the NBA Finals before falling short to a talented Miami Heat team led by Dwayne Wade and Shaq. In that Finals, the Jet would score over 30 points twice while proving to be one of the NBA's most efficient shooters from beyond the arc. From there, continuing to be a constant on the tops of NBA three-point lists, as he shot over 40% from three 4 separate times during his career, and in 2009 he was named the league's 6th man of the year. And as if that wasn't enough, a few seasons later, Jason would continue to shine for the Mavs off the bench, proving to be huge in the team's playoff success that year. In the Western Conference Finals, Jason would tie an NBA playoff record with 9 threes in a single game and would eventually help lead the Mavericks to the finals, where this time, again matched with the Heat, Dallas would win the 2011 NBA championship, and in the deciding Game 6, it was Jason Terry that would score 27 points to ensure that his team got the win. Number 4, Byron Scott. As we've seen throughout history, great players have often been overlooked as a result of no fault of their own, as sometimes players simply do not win individual awards because they played on a team full of stars. This was certainly the case in the career of Byron Scott, as while Scott was lucky enough to play alongside some of the NBA's all-time legends like Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Worthy, when Byron's career was all said and done, it was obvious that playing with 3 Hall of Fame teammates was both a blessing and a curse, because for 9 of Byron's 10 seasons with the Lakers, at least 2 of his teammates were voted into the All-Star game, and in 5 of those seasons, the Lakers would send 3 players to the All-Star game, making it virtually impossible for Scott to crack the All-Star roster because of Laker fatigue. Now, to further emphasize my point to prove just how hard it was for Byron Scott to be named an All-Star during this period, to this day there have only been 8 teams in league history that have ever sent more than 3 players to a single All-Star game. And during Byron Scott's career, only one team, the Philadelphia 76ers, had 4 All-Stars during a single season. This meant that even during Byron's best year, when in 1988 he averaged 21.7 points and 4.1 assists, he still was forced to watch the All-Star game at home as his 3 Hall of Fame teammates were instead chosen. And while throughout his career, while the media may not have thought Byron Scott was an all-star, the players he played against certainly felt a different way. For instance, Danny Ainge, one of Byron Scott's arch rivals on the Boston Celtics, has said, "I can't think of a better player who's never made an all-star team. I think Byron is one of the most underrated players who has ever played." So sure, Byron Scott was never an all-star, but what he was a 3-time NBA champion. And unlike most players on this list, Byron would eventually go on to earn some type of all-star recognition, as thanks to the Nets and the Hornets, Byron was named head coach of an all-star team twice, which meant that he finally got the recognition that he clearly deserved. Number 3, Richard Jefferson. Richard Jefferson's arrival in New Jersey marked the beginning of the best period of basketball the Nets have ever seen. In his first 2 seasons, New Jersey would make back-to-back finals appearances, with Richard establishing himself as a key piece of the team's core. In fact, Jefferson impressed so much that the Nets felt comfortable trading away then starter Keith Van Horn to allow Richard an even bigger role in the offense. confidence. And with his team's confidence, RJ managed to play even beyond the expectations that his team had set for him. As in his third season, he would finish top 20 in the league in win shares while dropping 15.5 points and 6.4 rebounds a night. From there, he would continue to develop as a scorer for the Nets, and the next season, he would average 18.5 points per game, but still, this was not his breakout year. As on the cusp of becoming a real star, Richard averaged all-star caliber numbers in 2005 by putting up 22.2 points and 7.3 rebounds per game before his season was cut short with a wrist injury that Richard claims was due to a dirty foul by Chauncey Billups. This injury would set him back for a single year, but in 2008, he would bounce back and again put up an all-star stat line of 22.6 points and 4.2 rebounds. Numbers that were certainly comparable to those of Paul Pierce, Joe Johnson, and Ray Allen at the time, but again, Richard Jefferson was passed over. Despite this lack of all-star recognition though, Richard has had a great NBA career and is proven to be one of those players that seemingly never ages. As in 2016, at the age of 36, RJ was certainly a factor in the Cavaliers championship run. Number 2, Mike Bibby. Mike Bibby is another example of a player that was a victim of the team that they were playing on simply being too good. As after starting out as a promising up-and-comer on a struggling Vancouver Grizzlies squad, Bibby was traded to the Sacramento Kings before the start of his 4th year. It was on the Kings that Mike began to hit his stride immediately, as new teammate Chris Webber's skill set paired perfectly with that of Bibby's, allowing the two to form one of the league's most dynamic duos while leading Sacramento to the best record in the NBA at 61-21. That season, the Kings could have won the NBA championship if it weren't for some questionable officiating, but despite this setback, Bibby would continue to establish himself as a player who came up big when the games mattered most, while also becoming arguably the X factor on one of the league's best rosters. Despite great stats and valuable play though, Mike would find himself continuously left off all-star rosters while watching his teammates such as Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, and Peja Stojakovic all play in all-star games thanks in part to how much Bibby was able to elevate their play. Looking at his career as a whole, Mike Bibby's most noteworthy all-star snub came during the 2005 season, when he averaged 19.6 points, 6.8 assists, and 4.2 rebounds on a playoff team that struggled to stay healthy but still was overlooked in favor of Manu Ginobili's 16 points, 3.9 assists, and 4.4 rebounds. By the time his career was over, it's clear that Bibby did have several all-star caliber seasons, but the timing just never seemed to be right. At least Sacramento Kings fans will always remember Mike Bibby as one of the greatest leaders and players on some of the greatest teams they've ever had in their franchise's history. And number 1, Cedric Maxwell. By the time his career was all said and done, Cedric Maxwell was never an all-star, but what he was the perfect example of the ultimate role player, the ultimate winner, and the ultimate example of efficiency. As at the time of his retirement, Cedric was the NBA's all-time leader in true shooting percentage. And going even further here, when we look at Cedric's game, it's clear that he did have the talent to be an all-star. But what's good for one player is not always what's best for his team. And so early on, despite averaging 19 points in just his 2nd season, Cedric made a decision to let better outside scorers like Larry Bird and Danny Ainge worry about shooting from deep, while he instead chose to pick his spots and let the offense come to him. And like many of the league's other great role players, Cedric would make a name for himself with clutch plays when the games mattered the most, as he would be named the Finals MVP for his contributions in the 1981 NBA Finals series against Moses Malone's Houston Rockets. In that series, Maxwell led the Celtics in scoring with 17.7 points on 56.8% shooting, while also grabbing nearly 10 rebounds a game and playing awesome defense. By the time this series was over, Cedric was just 25 years old and again was just named the finals MVP, so no one would blame him if he wanted a bigger role on a different team, especially when you consider that as a forward, Cedric's role on the Celtics would certainly diminish with the emergence of the big three of Bird, McHale, and Robert Parrish. But again, Cedric was that type of player that didn't need to be the man that got the headlines. All he wanted to do was win. And in his last 2 years in Boston, the Celtics would do just that. Cedric would help his team reach 2 straight NBA finals in 1984 and 1985. And looking specifically at that 1984 series, which the Celtics won, again, it was Cedric Maxwell who came up huge when his team needed him the most. Before a do-or-die Game 7 in those 1984 finals, Cedric gathered around his teammates and said, "Don't worry guys, I'm gonna put the team on my back," and then proceeded to score 24 points on just 10 shots in a 9-point Celtics win. So sure, Cedric Maxwell was never an all-star. He was, though, one of the most valuable role players the league has ever seen. So valuable that despite his lack of all-star recognition, the Celtics still chose to retire his number to honor the contributions he made to 2 championship teams. So guys, yeah, there was no face cam in this video. I'm sorry, I've been so sick. I really just wasn't feeling up for it. But if you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe. Getting back on the grind, going to be posting videos all week. So if you love basketball, again, subscribe so you don't miss one. And to everyone already subscribed, thank you guys so much. You are awesome. We all know this. And as always, have an awesome day, and cue that music.